The message on his phone, usually a mundane notification I'd barely register, became the sound of my world crumbling. It wasn't a loud, dramatic crash, but a slow, insidious creak, like timbers groaning under an unbearable weight. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, humming a tune from a forgotten playlist, when his phone buzzed on the island. He was in the shower, the water drumming a rhythm against the tiles, oblivious. A tiny, almost imperceptible part of me, the part that always felt a prickle of unease, nudged me. Just a glance, it whispered. He wouldn't mind. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? With a whisper, a tiny crack in the facade of trust. I picked up the phone, my fingers brushing against the cool glass. The lock screen lit up, and there it was, a preview of a message from a contact simply labeled neighbor. My breath hitched. It wasn't the name that stopped me, but the content of the preview. Can't wait for tonight. Our secret, right? My stomach dropped like a stone in a bottomless well. My hands, still damp from the counter, started to tremble. Our secret? What secret? My mind, usually so quick, felt like it was slogging through thick mud. I unlocked the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. And there it was, laid bare, a tapestry of deceit woven with casual ease. Messages, photos, plans. Not just for tonight, but for weeks, months. The neighbor. Our neighbor. The one who always smiled so sweetly over the fence, who borrowed sugar and returned it with a homemade pie. The one whose laughter I'd sometimes hear echoing from our shared patio. My husband, the man I'd built a life with for over a decade, the man who was supposed to be my anchor, my safe harbor, was having an affair with the woman next door. The world outside the kitchen window, moments ago bathed in the soft glow of a summer afternoon, seemed to dim. The humming tune died on my lips. I felt a cold wave wash over me, starting from my scalp and seeping down to my toes, leaving me numb and hollow. It wasn't just the betrayal that hit me. It was the sheer audacity, the proximity, the casualness of it all. How many times had I offered her a cup of coffee, chatted about garden woes, while she was secretly sharing my husband's bed? How many times had he kissed me goodbye, only to sneak next door moments later? The injustice of it all burned a raw hole in my chest. We were just weeks away from our 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years. A decade of shared dreams, sacrifices, laughter, and tears. I had poured my entire being into our life together, nurturing our home, supporting his career, being his confidant, his partner in every sense of the word. I had envisioned a future filled with quiet contentment, growing old together, reflecting on a life well lived. And now, this. A cheap, tawdry affair with the woman who lived 20 feet away. I scrolled through the messages, each word a fresh stab. Pet names, inside jokes, complaints about me. He called me uptight, boring, too focused on work. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I worked hard for us, for the future we planned. He complained about my focus, while his was clearly elsewhere, focused on clandestine meetings and whispered promises. The anger started to simmer, a low, dangerous hum beneath the shock. It wasn't a fiery rage, not yet. It was a cold, calculating fury, the kind that makes your blood run slow and your thoughts crystal clear. I heard the shower turn off. The sudden silence was deafening. My heart pounded harder. He would be out any minute. What would I do? Scream? Cry? Throw the phone at him? The thought of a messy confrontation, of seeing his pathetic excuses, his feigned remorse, made my stomach churn. No, that wasn't my style. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not now. Not ever. A strange calm settled over me. A chilling clarity. I closed the messaging app, locked his phone, and placed it back exactly where I found it. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was sharp, focused. I took a deep, shaky breath, then another. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. My eyes, usually bright, were shadowed, but there was a new glint in them, a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. He walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel, humming. He looked at me, a casual smile on his face. "Hey, love. Almost ready for dinner?" I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing that felt alien on my face. Almost. Just finishing up here. My voice was steady, surprisingly so. He didn't notice a thing. Not the tremor in my hands, not the storm raging behind my eyes. He just grabbed a glass of water, oblivious, and walked out. In that moment, watching him walk away, a plan began to form, insidious and delicious. Our anniversary dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration of our love, our decade together. It would be a celebration, all right, just not the one he expected. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of dread and exhilarating anticipation. I would make sure he and his little secret would never forget our 10th anniversary. The stage was set. The players were unknowingly in their positions, and I, the seemingly oblivious wife, was about to become the director of the most spectacular, humiliating drama of their lives. The curtain was about to rise, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they would never see it coming. The days that followed were a masterclass in emotional suppression. Every morning, I'd wake up with the same leaden weight in my chest, the same bitter taste in my mouth, but I'd plaster on a smile, a mask of normalcy so convincing I almost fooled myself. My husband, bless his oblivious heart, seemed to float through life, whistling tunes, making casual comments about our big anniversary dinner. Each word was a fresh insult, each touch a violation. He'd talk about how much he loved me, how lucky he was, and I'd just nod, my mind miles away, meticulously planning his downfall. It was a strange, twisted form of self-preservation. I couldn't scream, couldn't cry, couldn't even allow myself the luxury of breaking down. Not yet. I needed to be strong, lucid, and utterly ruthless. The injustices piled up, not just the affair, but the years of subtle slights that now, in retrospect, seemed to scream disregard. He had always made me feel like my contributions were secondary, my opinions less valid. When I started my own small business, pouring my savings and countless sleepless nights into it, he'd dismissively call it my little hobby. He'd often interrupt me in conversations, finishing my sentences or correcting me, always with that patronizing smile that said, "I know better." I remembered one particularly painful incident at a family gathering. I was excitedly sharing an idea for a new product, something I'd worked on for months, and he chimed in, "Oh, she gets so carried away with these things. It's just a phase, really." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. A hollow, empty sound, while inside, something withered. He was a master of gaslighting, though I didn't have the term for it then. My concerns about his late nights, his distant behavior, were always met with a sigh, a roll of the eyes. "You're being paranoid," he'd say. "You're imagining things. Why are you always so suspicious?" He made me question my own sanity, made me feel like I was the problem, the one who was too emotional, too demanding. I started to believe it, to shrink, to silence the voice of my own intuition. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, always. I gave him my trust, my loyalty, my unwavering support. I gave him everything. And he, with the casual cruelty of a child discarding a broken toy, was discarding me. The trigger phrase, "I gave them everything, and they discarded me like nothing," echoed in my mind constantly. It wasn't just him. It was the collective silence of those around us. His family, who always seemed to adore him, saw nothing, said nothing. My own parents, who had always preached the sanctity of marriage, seemed to turn a blind eye to the subtle shifts in our dynamic. They'd say, "All marriages have their ups and downs," or, "Just try harder, dear." No one saw the slow erosion of my spirit, the way I was slowly becoming invisible in my own home. I was a prop, a convenient fixture, while he lived a double life right under my nose. The neighbor, meanwhile, continued her charade. She'd wave from her porch, offer a friendly, "Good morning," when I was getting the mail. Her smile, once innocent, now seemed to drip with a saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache. I'd force myself to return her greetings, my voice even, my eyes betraying nothing. Inside, a storm brewed. I imagined her laughing with him, mocking me, their secret a shared joke. The thought fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about my husband's betrayal. It was about her complicity, her audacious disrespect. She knew I was his wife, knew we were celebrating our anniversary, and yet she reveled in her role as the other woman. One evening, as I watched them from my kitchen window, him pretending to fix a loose fence post while she leaned over, whispering and giggling, a cold, hard certainty solidified within me. This wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth, which they had so carelessly trampled. The tension in my body was a constant hum, a tightly coiled spring. I felt like a bomb, ticking silently, waiting for the precise moment to detonate. The audience, my husband and his mistress, were completely unaware of the explosive performance I was preparing for them. They thought they were the stars of their own little illicit drama. They were wrong. I was the star, and I was about to deliver a performance they would never forget. The curtain was rising, and they were about to be caught in the spotlight, exposed for all to see. The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache that throbbed beneath my skin, but something profound had shifted. It was no longer a debilitating agony. It was a fuel. The tears I refused to shed had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just hurt. I was strategically furious. My mind, once clouded by confusion and self-doubt, was now a finely tuned instrument, dissecting every detail, every possibility. The idea of an emotional explosion, of screaming and throwing things, now seemed utterly absurd. That would be giving them exactly what they wanted. My breakdown, my humiliation. No, I would not give them that satisfaction. I would be a quiet storm, an unseen force. My first move was to secure the evidence. I didn't just screenshot. I meticulously documented. Every message, every photo, every suggestive emoji was saved, dated, and backed up to a secure cloud drive, and then again to a physical hard drive hidden deep within my office. I even managed to retrieve deleted messages from his phone's backup, a little trick I'd learned from a tech-savvy friend years ago. The sheer volume of their illicit communication was staggering. It wasn't a fleeting indiscretion. It was a full-blown, long-term affair, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. The acid humor began to bubble up then, a dark, cynical amusement at the sheer theatricality of their deception. They thought they were so clever, so discreet. They had no idea they were writing their own script for my grand reveal. I started making subtle changes to my routine. Instead of coming straight home from work, I'd make errands, which were actually clandestine meetings with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a sharp, no-nonsense family law specialist known for her discretion and her ability to navigate complex financial separations. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I was considering my options. I wanted to understand the legal landscape, to know my rights, to ensure that when the dust settled, I wouldn't be left with nothing. She became my silent ally, a powerful force operating behind the scenes. She advised me on protecting my assets, on documenting everything, on building an ironclad case. Knowledge is power, she'd told me, her eyes keen and empathetic, and patience is your greatest weapon. I also remembered something from years ago, a seemingly insignificant detail that now felt like a hidden ace up my sleeve. Early in our marriage, when he was struggling to get his business off the ground, I had invested a significant portion of my inheritance, money my grandmother had left me specifically for my future, into his company. It was a substantial sum, enough to keep him afloat during a critical period. We had signed a simple, almost informal agreement at the time, drafted by a junior lawyer, stating that if the business ever dissolved or if we separated, my initial investment would be returned to me, with a small percentage of interest. He had probably forgotten all about it or dismissed it as a mere formality. But I hadn't. I had kept the original signed document in a safe deposit box, a forgotten relic of a more trusting time. Now, it was a ticking time bomb. My lawyer's eyes widened when I mentioned it. "This changes everything," she'd said, a glint of admiration in her gaze. "You were always 10 steps ahead, weren't you?" The psychological shift was complete. The pain was still there, a phantom limb, but it no longer controlled me. I was lucid, cold, strategic. I observed him, observed her, with a detached curiosity. I noticed their furtive glances, the way they'd subtly touch when they thought no one was looking, the almost imperceptible smiles they'd share. It was like watching a play, and I was the only one who knew the ending. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a delicious tension building within me. The final piece of my plan was the guest list for our anniversary dinner. It was a small, intimate gathering, just close friends and family. And then, with a seemingly innocent smile, I suggested, "Oh, and we should invite the neighbors. They're so sweet, and we haven't had them over properly." My husband, caught off guard, hesitated for a split second. "The neighbors? Are you sure? It's our anniversary, a bit intimate." I waved his concerns away. "Nonsense. The more the merrier. Besides, they're always so kind. It would be rude not to." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable but unable to articulate why. "All right, if you insist." He didn't know I knew. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know I had already invited her, and, for good measure, her unsuspecting boyfriend, a kind, slightly awkward man who worked in finance and was blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around him. The irony was exquisite. I was setting the stage for the most spectacular public humiliation, and they were walking right into it, smiling all the way. The thought of their faces when the truth finally hit them was the only thing keeping me going. The calm before the storm was almost serene. I was ready. The night of our 10th anniversary dinner arrived, draped in an almost unbearable tension. The air in our dining room, usually filled with comfortable chatter, felt thick, charged. I had meticulously set the table, lit candles, chosen the perfect playlist, a selection of classical pieces that felt ironically fitting for the impending tragedy. My husband, dressed in his finest suit, looked genuinely happy, almost giddy. He kept glancing at me, a possessive smile on his face, completely oblivious to the sword of Damocles hanging over his head. The acid humor was bubbling fiercely inside me. He thought he was celebrating a decade of marital bliss. He was about to celebrate a decade of deceit, exposed. The first guests arrived, a few close friends, some family members. The atmosphere was light, festive, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. Then, the doorbell chimed again. My heart gave a little lurch. This was it. I walked to the door, a serene smile plastered on my face. There they were, the neighbor, radiant in a shimmering blue dress, and her boyfriend, looking a little overwhelmed by the occasion. "So glad you could make it," I chirped, my voice perfectly modulated. The neighbor's eyes flickered to my husband, a quick, almost imperceptible glance that spoke volumes. He gave her a nervous, almost imperceptible nod. Oh, they were good. But I was better. Dinner proceeded with an agonizing slowness. I played the perfect hostess, engaging in polite conversation, refilling wine glasses, making sure everyone was comfortable. My husband, emboldened by a few drinks, started recounting our story, embellishing details, painting a picture of a perfect, unbreakable bond. The neighbor sat across from me, occasionally catching my eye, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She thought she was part of the secret, part of the exclusive club. She had no idea she was the main act in a very public spectacle. Her boyfriend, bless his innocent heart, was chatting amiably with my cousin, completely oblivious. The moment came after dessert as coffee was being served. The conversation had lulled, a comfortable quiet settling over the table. My husband raised his glass. "To 10 years," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "To my beautiful wife, who has been my rock, my everything. I couldn't imagine my life without you." I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Thank you, darling," I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "And I couldn't imagine mine without you, or without the fascinating discoveries I've made recently." A ripple of polite confusion went around the table. My husband's smile faltered. The neighbor's eyes darted to me, a flicker of unease. Her boyfriend looked puzzled. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "it's funny how life works. You think you know someone, you trust them implicitly, and then a little message pops up." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. A message that changes everything. My husband cleared his throat. "What are you talking about, dear?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight. I reached into the elegant clutch bag I'd placed beside my chair. With a flourish, I pulled out a sleek, thin tablet. "Well, darling," I said, my voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Since we're celebrating honesty and commitment tonight, I thought it was only fair to share some insights." I tapped the screen. A large, clear image projected onto the wall behind us, thanks to a discreet projector I'd set up earlier, disguised as a decorative light fixture. It was a screenshot of a text message. His name at the top, the neighbor's contact name below it. And the message, "Can't wait for tonight. Our secret, right?" A collective gasp went around the table. The neighbor's face went ashen, her eyes wide with terror. Her boyfriend, who had been laughing moments before, froze, his jaw slack. My husband's face drained of all color, his eyes fixed on the projected image, a deer caught in headlights. "Oh, but that's just the beginning," I purred, scrolling through the tablet. More images flashed onto the wall, photos of them together, intimate messages, dates, times, locations. A dossier, meticulously compiled, laid bare for everyone to see. The room was silent, save for the faint whirring of the projector. The air crackled with shock and disbelief. "You see," I explained, addressing the stunned guests. "For months, while I was building my little hobby business, while I was supporting his big career, they were building something else. A secret life, right next door." I looked directly at the neighbor, my gaze unwavering. "Isn't that right, neighbor?" She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her boyfriend, pale and shaken, finally found his voice. "What? What is this?" he stammered, looking from her to my husband, then back to me. "It's the truth, honey," I said, my voice laced with a cold satisfaction. "The truth about your girlfriend and my husband, about their secret rendezvous, their whispered confessions, their shared contempt for the uptight, boring wife." I looked at my husband, who was now visibly trembling. "Isn't that what you called me, darling? Uptight? Boring?" He finally managed to stammer. This is a misunderstanding. She's lying." "Oh, am I?" I chuckled. A dark, mirthless sound. I tapped the tablet again. An audio recording began to play, low at first, then clearer. It was his voice, unmistakable, whispering sweet nothings to her, complaining about me, planning their next illicit meeting. The recording was from a tiny, voice-activated recorder I'd hidden in his car. The neighbor let out a small, strangled cry. Her boyfriend stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice shaking with rage, looking at her. She burst into tears, shaking her head, but her denial was weak, unconvincing. "And just for good measure," I added, my voice cutting through the rising chaos. "Since we're talking about truth and consequences, I've also taken the liberty of informing his company's board of directors about certain financial irregularities." "You see, darling," I said, turning back to my husband, "that little investment I made in your company 10 years ago? The one you conveniently forgot about? My lawyer has been very busy this week. It seems there's a clause in that old agreement that states if the marriage dissolves due to infidelity, my initial investment, plus a significant penalty, is immediately due. And given the evidence I've provided, I believe the board will find it quite compelling." His face was a mask of horror. He looked utterly defeated, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The neighbor was sobbing uncontrollably, her boyfriend glaring at her with a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. The other guests were a tableau of shock, some whispering, some openly staring. "So," I concluded, my voice clear and strong, "to 10 years, and to a very public, very satisfying end." I raised my glass, not to him, but to myself. The catharsis was overwhelming, a wave of relief washing over me. The revenge wasn't physical, but it was devastating. Social, financial, reputational. He was exposed. She was exposed. And I, the discarded wife, had reclaimed my power, my control, and my respect. The applause in my head was deafening. The aftermath of that anniversary dinner was predictably, a whirlwind of chaos. The immediate fallout was a spectacle of raw, unfiltered emotion. The neighbor's boyfriend, a man whose quiet demeanor belied a furious temper, dragged her out of our house, his voice a low, guttural growl of betrayal. I heard their argument erupting on the lawn, a cacophony of accusations and tearful denials, until their car screeched away into the night. My husband, meanwhile, was a pathetic mess, slumped in his chair, muttering incoherent apologies and threats. His family, initially stunned, quickly turned on him, their faces etched with disgust and disappointment. Our friends, a mix of shock and quiet support, offered hushed words of comfort before discreetly excusing themselves. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and the surreal experience of watching my husband's carefully constructed life unravel. The board of directors, presented with the irrefutable evidence of his infidelity and the financial clause, acted swiftly. His position was terminated, his reputation in the industry irrevocably tarnished. The company, which he had always boasted was his legacy, was now facing a significant payout to me, a payout that would cripple its immediate future. The poetic justice of it was almost too sweet to bear. He had used my money, my support, to build his empire, and now that same foundation was crumbling beneath him, thanks to his own recklessness. The divorce proceedings were swift and relatively clean, thanks to the undeniable evidence and the pre-existing agreement. I walked away with my initial investment, a substantial settlement, and, more importantly, my dignity intact. He was left with the ruins of his career, a shattered reputation, and the bitter taste of public humiliation. The neighbor, I heard, moved out of town shortly after, unable to face the whispers and stares. Her relationship was over, her life upended. I felt no joy in her suffering, only a quiet satisfaction that justice in its own way had been served. Life after the storm wasn't a magical, sun-drenched paradise, but it was undeniably peaceful. The constant hum of anxiety that had been my companion for years finally quieted. The weight on my chest lifted. There were still moments, of course, when a pang of sadness would surface, a nostalgic ache for the life I thought I had, the future I had envisioned. 10 years is a long time, and you don't just erase it without leaving a scar. But the scars were fading, replaced by a quiet strength. I poured myself into my business, turning my little hobby into a thriving enterprise. The financial freedom was liberating, but the true liberation came from within. I no longer sought external validation. I no longer needed to be seen, to be acknowledged by others. I saw myself, truly saw myself, for the first time in a long time. I was intelligent, resilient, capable. I had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged not broken, but stronger. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to that quiet voice inside that had warned me for so long. I learned that sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in fighting loudly, but in planning silently, in observing, and in striking with precision when the time is right. I learned that true power isn't about control over others, but about control over yourself, your emotions, your destiny. My home, once a stage for deceit, became my sanctuary. I redecorated, purging the spaces of old memories, filling them with new energy, new possibilities. The dining room, where the truth had been unveiled, was no longer a place of pain, but a symbol of my triumph. The last time I saw him, it was by chance, at a local grocery store. He looked older, his shoulders slumped, his eyes haunted. He saw me, and for a moment, a flicker of something, shame, regret, crossed his face. He quickly turned away, disappearing down an aisle. I didn't feel anger or even pity, just a profound sense of detachment. He was a ghost from a past life, a lesson learned. I walked out of the store, the sun warm on my face, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves in the trees. The world felt vibrant, full of promise. I had lost a husband, a marriage, a decade of my life, but I had found myself, and that, I realized, was the greatest gain of all. The journey had been long, fraught with pain and humiliation, but I had walked through the fire and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably refined. I had proven to myself and to anyone who doubted me that I was not invisible, not discardable. I was a force. And as I drove away, leaving the past firmly in my rearview mirror, one thought echoed in my mind, a silent, powerful affirmation. Some secrets aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be exposed. And then they become the very foundation of your freedom.